Greetings and welcome to this episode of the Podguiders. I'll start again.
The Podguiders. The
Keep that in.
Gas to the Blalaxy. Is
Yeah.
that the Pidwiddle's twat to the starry shininess?
Use your words.
This is why I don't do it very often, isn't it?
Use someone else's words. They're probably better.
And you're a teacher.
I'm not anymore.
Was a teacher. Was.
Greetings and welcome to this episode of the Podguiders. Oh, for fuck's sake.
Again. Alien Xenomorph says.
Oh,
The
Jesus.
Podguiders cast.
Oh, man. Right.
Do you want to try it one more time? Take a deep breath.
Be professional. Come on.
Take an actual deep breath.
Okay.
We're all behind you.
Greetings. Oh.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Greetings and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Galaxy. I'd like to introduce to you our host for this week. First of all, there is me, obligatory Bruce Willis reference. Next up, he doesn't know his MCU from his MCDONALDS, but for some reason he's allowed to breed. It's Rich Finn.
Hooray! McDonald's
It would have been funny if you'd said MC-80 as in a Moncal Cruiser, considering we're going to go for Star Wars.
Right.
But that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just let me give you jokes the once over next time.
I'll let you do the funnies.
Pierce
Next
Finney
up.
don't breed.
Next up, he's a joyful little sprite, so irritating that even Peter Jackson wouldn't cast him in the Hobbit films. It's Tom!
Hey, wait, what?
You're short and you're annoying. And you're too annoying even for the Hobbit, which was annoying.
Okay, thank you for
Potatoes.
explaining.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
that all tracks.
And finally, it's our resident evil genius, megalomaniac, so utterly terrible that he'll one day be played by Jesse Eisenberg. It's Daisy!
That was fucking uncalled for.
But, opposite, it kind of links back to our trying to remember who the fuck Jesse Eisenberg was in the last episode.
Yeah.
I may have rewritten that while we did the last episode. Anyway,
Okay, right.
Okay, so I'm quite excited today because this is a first for the Podcaster's Guide to the Galaxy, which is we're going to bring on in a few moments a very special guest. First of all,
A guest! A guest! A
Elon
poor
Musk.
bastard guest!
friend.
Friend! Friend of the shadows! Friends!
Nurse. It's Nurse. He's escaped again.
So, what we're going to do, I have one more friend other than you guys, and
Nice.
his name is John. This friend is one of the biggest nerds that I have ever met. He is a former science teacher, which automatically makes him massively nerdy. He's fully into science education. He loves Lego. He loves comic books.
He's good credentials.
Yeah, he's got some very good nerd credentials. However,
And literally one of the biggest nerds you know, isn't he? Height-wise, is that
yeah,
correct?
height-wise, he's actually 15 foot tall and made of clay. But he's never seen Star Wars. Now, being a man of science...
What?
I
Dun,
know.
dun, dun.
I'm leaving the podcast.
Many times
Yeah, we
over
were
the
going to
years-
tell you, actually. No, sorry.
Yeah, many times over the years, I've tried to say to him, look, John, it's Star Wars is quite cool. You should watch it. Because John is a man of science and he needs to be persuaded through logical reasons. So with that in mind, Rich, Tom, Daisy, and myself are going to spend the next however many minutes, hours, weeks, whatever it is, trying to persuade John to watch Star Wars.
Yeah.
Keep everything crossed because he could still say no.
Yep.
That option is still open to him. Okay, so I'm quite excited. I'm also quite nervous because we've never had a guest on before, so we don't know how this is going to go.
I'm
an
nervous
extra
in
voice
case I
there.
realise that I shouldn't watch Star Wars anymore.
That's genuinely like just whatever you do, guys, don't talk about the Rise of Skywalker or the Last Jedi. Palpatine.
Come on, hold it back.
Yeah,
Can't go
because even I might not want to watch it then.
It's a tacit, unspoken agreement. We'll gloss over all the shit bits.
Yeah, all the shit bits gone.
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's also done stand-up comedy before, so he's automatically going to be much funnier than us.
I hate him already.
We might end the podcast with us being fired.
You did hear my Xenomorph impression. Yeah?
Fair point.
You
Okay.
did, 2 tours of Edinburgh Fringe with that, didn't you, Dave?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
John and I have done the Duke of Edinburgh's Fringe.
It's any fringe you've ever got.
Yeah. Okay, right. Should we bring him in?
Let's bring him
Let's
in.
do it.
Welcome him in.
Really,
Okay.
mate.
Let us
Welcome.
open the Zoom door.
Welcome to the show, Mr.
Open the blast doors.
Jonathan
Open the blast doors.
Badgery.
Hooray!
Yay!
Friend of the show.
I assume it's a pleasure to
whether
be
he
here.
likes it
Show.
or not.
Okay,
Hello, John.
Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, John.
Are you prepared? Are you braced for this experience?
Yeah, I mean this is a tedious argument that I have a lot because being a
Good,
geeky
tedious.
person, I surround myself with geeky people who are always trying to put this case across.
Yeah.
I mean this is a nice change that there's a bit of formality to it and that it's 4 against 1, which seems fair. But, I
Tedious,
think
repetitive, formalised. These are the magic ingredients of any podcast. So
absolutely.
get on gas.
So I have arguments under my belt, and happy to try and be convinced. I'm not optimistic that you will, but there we go.
I will just say that, as you said, that it is 4 against 1. So if you say no, we are going to take you round the back and give you a kick in by the bins.
Yeah, but from what you've
Amazing.
told me, you're all about half my size, aren't you?
That
but
is a fair point.
We all
I'm
come
just going off a thumbnail, but you all look about the same size as Hayden.
We'll come at you
That's
like
true.
Devastator.
That
Tom
is
on my
absolutely
shoulders.
true.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Daisy is a dangerous leg.
I am.
Yeah.
So you're
Well-
going to attack an individual limb each, I see.
There'll be like 4 hobbits trying to stop an Ent.
I mean, a discussion for another day, but the Lord of the Rings series is another one that I haven't seen.
What
Yeah.
the fuck?
Right, I'm
Who is this person?
I don't think I can
I
tell
mean,
you today.
if you want an idea of the kind of major movie franchises that I've not seen, but I'm just so aware of them. For example, the Hobbit versus Ent comment. Like, I know what it is, but I just haven't bothered to sit down and watch the film. So I've not seen any Star Wars, any of the Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones.
Oh, balls, that's
Yes.
Jason, have you invited the right guy?
I can tell you a decent bit
If your goal is
about
to
the
make this
MCU, DC Comics, particle physics, chemistry,
There's a lot to process there for all of us.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're here and you're willing to be
Yeah.
persuaded
Let's do
Subjective.
if we can convince you. So
It's not like I had to cancel any plans, so there we go.
okay, well, in the interest of expediency, shall we crack on, Jason? What do you want to?
Let's crack on. I believe that we're going to start with Tom, because by the sounds of it, Tom has produced some of the most compelling arguments.
No, not
Rich,
at all.
Rich once again probably hasn't done his homework, and so
Well, it might
They're not
actually
crying.
be better if I go first.
okay,
You
as
wanna go
originally
first? Okay.
Suggested,
yeah, okay, let's go for it.
because the argument is so poor.
That's a really good start.
Just quickly before we start though, and mainly just to give myself some airtime, because I have nothing to say. I'm just interested in, given that your background, like how you have, I suppose, how these things have gone by, and how you haven't been coerced into seeing them or seen them accidentally already. Certainly Star Wars, because it is culturally invasive, isn't it? Whether you like it or not. So how have you managed to keep your head down all these years? That's quite interesting.
Well, I think with these particular films, that you normally see them as a child, don't you? You know, there's maybe a parental influence or some sort of external influence there when you are younger that says, "Oh, give this a go." You know, much like most major religions induct children in that sort of methodology.
Of which Star Wars is a major religion.
Oh yeah. If you ever needed an example of a cult, I'd say Star Wars and Apple. But
what? Sorry,
I'm with
cult.
him.
Sorry,
I'm with him.
Yeah.
In our household, there just wasn't that kind of, interest there.
Yeah.
You know, you'd probably already ascertained wasn't the most popular child at school, so wasn't
Do any of us look like we were popular children at school?
No, but I mean, there's no external influence there to bring you into the fold when you're younger.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of people who have been bitten by the bug, like 90% of that feeling is nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I've avoided it because it didn't hit me at the right time.
Didn't hit you.
Badge, how old are you?
30.
Okay.
He's a young'un.
I have to have the beard so people realise I'm an actual adult. Without this, so.
Fair enough. The fact you're 6'5" doesn't give it away.
No.
Okay. I just think you're a giant baby.
Yeah.
How does that feel, Jason?
Well, people think I'm a tiny baby. A tiny.
You do walk around wearing a nappy
baby.
though, so you walk around wearing a nappy though, so you kind of bring it on yourself. That is true. Okay, so Badge, you would have been. So I'm trying to think how old you are. So you were born in 1990.
89, just at the end of 89.
89. Okay, so when you were a kid, the prequels would have been around, I suppose.
Yeah, so I'm aware of
No.
episode 1.
Oh
being
yeah. When he was a kid. Yes.
advertised on the TV. When I was about 7 or 8, something like that.
Okay, but the first films 4, 5, and 6 before you were born would have just passed you by. Okay, fair enough.
They were in the cinema in 97, 98, weren't they? When they did the special editions.
They did the remasters.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but you'd have been about 8. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of disposable income at that stage, so I never quite made it into the town.
Okay.
So,
Good.
Rich, do you want to?
Okay, well, I haven't really got much to add. So my argument is going to go like this. So you were a science teacher, you said?
Yep.
General or specialising?
Mainly physics, but I did teach general science.
That works really well, and that means my argument is going to succeed. So you like stars?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next bit was going to be you like wars, but that obviously is not a good thing to say. So then I was just going to fall back on, well, you like stars and you should watch 50% of the Star Wars films.
I mean, it is an argument. There's no denying that. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a quality argument.
I wouldn't even say it's an argument.
Badge, you were at military school, weren't you?
I was at military school.
Yeah, so you do like wars. You love stars.
I've been to military school and I've had a few years.
But you do love wars.
I would...
You heard it here first.
So,
he loves wars. He loves stars. He should love Star Wars.
Right.
But before we go any further, shouldn't it actually be Stars War rather than Star Wars? Maybe that's a debate for another day.
Shut up.
You're not helping the cause.
You're not on
by
our side
pointing
anymore.
out the complete wrongness of the title.
Next.
I mean, which argument do you want me to take apart first? I mean, the last one, no, it shouldn't be, because there are multiple wars hosted in different star systems. Now, the thing is, when you are a geek and immersed in geek culture, you're going to get a lot of these references. They are woven into the culture.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of them. And I know for a fact that Star Wars doesn't actually feature stars. I mean, the Death Star is not a star. It's a...
Careful.
It's no moon.
That's a strong rebuttal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know, because if it was people based on stars, then they would incinerate as soon as they touched down. Because even the coldest stars are a little bit warm, is how I'd describe it.
Yeah, but to be fair, Death Vehicle doesn't have the same sort of ring as Death Star.
So your argument's sure, I take it. I have military experience, I have physics experience, so logically that would make sense. But unfortunately, Star Wars itself has not held up their end of the bargain.
That's good. That is good.
Okay.
Why did we rely on Finney contributing anything to this conversation?
See, the way I see it, we sent Finney out first as kind of like a wave of shit goblins before the hard orcs turn up. He's arrow fodder, basically.
Send me your tribute.
He's an Ewok.
He's an Ewok.
Yep.
He's an Ewok who doesn't even have a fucking axe and a fucking tree branch to slam into an ATST. But you won't get that because it's a Star Wars reference.
No, I do. Because, it is so ubiquitous. Like, I have a massive Lego collection. Star Wars is the biggest selling Lego theme. Mm-hmm. So when I see the new sets come out, I know what's in them. I know the characters. This says so on the box. I do my research. I know how cool the Ewok Village set looks. But it doesn't mean I want to engage in the narrative.
Badgery, have you been to Legoland?
I think, Legoland Windsor when I was a small boy. That's where I got my first driver's license.
You need to go there as an adult, and you need to go and walk around the Lego Star Wars exhibit there. Because, regardless of what happens here, whether you watch Star Wars or not, it is incredible. That's not an argument, that's just a recommendation, sorry.
You do it for our next date, Jace, when lockdown finishes, and we could be the two guys just wandering around the kids' park.
Yeah, that won't look weird at all.
I've got my DBS is still good. I don't know about you.
Isn't a teacher anymore.
If anyone questions it, I'm just going to hold your hand and pretend you're my dad.
No,
that would work. And people will be like, "Hey, why is that giant baby holding hands with that tiny baby? What's going on there? What kind of a weird family?" I know this is 2020, but geez.
Why Jason can just
why are they in lockdown?
Jason can just wear a child harness restraint, and then Badgery can just hold the lead to it and just walk him around.
Yeah, pop him in my papoose.
Oh dear! Right, Tom, please rescue us.
I'll do my best.
Try and follow that if you can.
I'll try.
Okay.
Badge. Right, fine. So we've established you're a scientist. Would you say you what did you train as? Did you just train to be a science teacher, or did you actually do physics?
So my undergrad degree was chemical physics, and at the end of that I chose to do a dissertation in quantum electrodynamics, and then trained to be a physics teacher.
Easy for you to say. Okay, right, quantum electrodynamics. So it's fair to say that when approaching a task, you have a rigorous evidence-based methodology. That's your bread and butter. Fine. Okay. Now, is it then also fair to say that there are times where you want to park that shit at the door and just get lost in some complete nonsense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well then in that case, Star Wars is for you, because I can assure you that in Star Wars, there is essentially no attention whatsoever paid to the laws of physics. Okay? These movies don't even pretend to relate to science. I know it's got Star and Wars in the title. I know that they're spaceships, but it's not like Star Trek or Babylon 5. Not that you care about those, we've established. But the Spitfire, the space ships fly like Spitfires in space. They don't give a shit about the fact there's no atmosphere. Okay, no one uses words longer than 3 syllables to describe the technology around interdimensional travel. The most powerful characters are literally space wizards. They make rocks hover and they jump around like people-sized grasshoppers. Let me be clear, Jedi don't give a fuck about the laws of thermodynamics, buddy. There's nothing there. There are unequal and inopposite reactions all over the shop. You can leave your science brain at the door. Now, doesn't that have some value?
Now, I'm fully on board with science fiction. Now, what I like about a science fiction is when you have established a new set of rules that don't necessarily match up with reality.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to reject the premise. I'm going to reject the premise of what you're saying, because Star Wars is not science fiction. Categorically. At best, it's space opera.
Space opera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way, a fantasy narrative where there are new norms and new rules established, I'm fully on board with that. And I like that. Once you know what those norms are and what those rules are, you can really start to explore new ideas, and I like that imaginative exploration. However, that is most exciting when you are getting into the narrative, when you are looking at it in a particular context, or when you're kind of discovering along with the narrative. That's really exciting. The trouble is, because Star Wars as a brand is so ubiquitous, there is nothing in there that is going to surprise me. The fact that I know that you've got your magic space wizards and your magic bread knives that glow and stuff, and you can have a little fight with them, and for some reason that's more effective than another gun that shoots lasers. That you do have these different, laser blaster. That you've got your little pod racers and whatever they are. Like I know too many references, because it's been so widely parodied. It's been so widely explored within geek culture that it's not going to offer me anything I've not seen before.
Can I say one thing? I think we should end the podcast where he said I'm on board and just pretend we've won the argument.
Slander, absolute slander.
The evil of editing. Okay, all right. So let's talk about the argument for a minute. And I know I'm going to completely destroy any semblance of comedy by actually trying to have a discussion here. So I apologise. But
something. It doesn't matter if it's fun. We're here to learn. We're here to make progress. It doesn't. The fun's not important. You can have it as a
need to move forward.
But it's not the goal.
Yeah. Okay. We're all on the same terrible boat in a storm. So by that same argument that you already know basically what the moving parts of the narrative are, by that same argument, should anybody ever read Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities, or Shakespeare's The Tempest, or Homer's The Odyssey? If somebody suggested to you that reading one of those books was worth doing, would you make that same argument to them?
Did Homer Simpson write a book?
Yes, he did.
He wrote a book about Abe's Odyssey, the computer game.
Yes, he did.
I think it's a valid point, but what you're equating there is that what one gets out of Star Wars is the same as what one would get out of classic literature and classical literature. Whereas your argument for getting into the Star Wars universe, for want of a better term, is this idea of that suspending disbelief. Whereas if you look at a lot of classic literature, the reason they've stood the test of time is not that sense of disbelief, but that sense of character, that sense of language, the allegory that comes with those more scrutinized, more they're established parts of the literary canon, and they offer something beyond just that kind of surface imagination.
Okay, I'm very glad that you said that, Badge. I think you're absolutely right, because that moves me neatly on to the next part of my argument, which is to explain that what Star Wars does deliver in spades, it doesn't provide realism, doesn't provide scientific fact. What it does deliver in spades is classic modern cinematic representations of heroic narratives. I don't know how much you know about George Lucas, but it's no accident that the creator of Star Wars, when he came up with it, studied Greek mythology, like the Odyssey is a good example. The stories are full of the archetypes that you're talking about, of the kind of narrative elements that are the fundamental core of mythological storytelling. And what George Lucas did was he turned them into films that resonated across audiences of every age and culture around the world. Now, if for no other reason, then it's worth watching the first Star Wars film for that. And you could watch the first Star Wars film and I would accept the argument to say, do you know what, I've seen Star Wars, it was the film Star Wars, and I enjoyed it, and I don't need to watch any others. I would accept that as an argument on these grounds. But by your own logic there, these films are absolutely worth watching because they achieve all those things that you talked about, the kind of classic literature that we touched on, and they do it for film. George Lucas is not the best writer. He's not even the best director, but he is one of the finest storytellers to ever make movies. There's no doubt about that. And
so what you're saying is
I want to stand up and applaud at that point. I mean, backdrop, little Rebel Alliance flag fell down behind me.
Yeah, play the music where Pan and Thing get the medal. Yeah, play
you might get a medal. Yeah.
you get a medal.
Loads of applause. Yeah.
I think the points there are valid. You are admitting to the fact that it's derivative. You know, that you can draw the parallel between classic literature and Star Wars, but what you're looking at there is the difference between the origin and the derivative. I appreciate there's a new medium there, but the stories certainly of classical Greek and their kind of tropes and their heroes, and the kind of Shakespearean heroes, you know, they are ubiquitous throughout modern cinema because it's quite hard to come up with a new idea. Lots of ideas have happened. And because we are so used to absorbing these ideas, then, you know, it's quite hard to distinguish it. So your point is valid, but it's not. It's I suppose if you've got the time, you know, to check in on it, you've got nothing better to do, that's fine. But you're going to get the same effect of this kind of derivation of kind of classical narrative from plenty of sources.
Okay, I'm gonna challenge the word derivation because I think that good storytelling is not about derivation; it's about distillation, and it's about taking those elements and creating something, as you said earlier, creating something new and dynamic with them. The word dynamic is my word, and that is why Star Wars is worth watching. It is worth absorbing. So another thing that's worth talking about in terms of Star Wars and its value and why it's just cool to watch. The quality and the craft of the mythological filmmaking does resonate with audiences, and in that respect, the craft of these films is an art and a science. George Lucas, I'm going to talk about him again because, you know, Star Wars and George Lucas, it's usually where people go. He is a fantastic innovator when it comes to the craft of filmmaking itself. If you enjoy watching films, if you enjoy watching big budget Hollywood tentpole movies, you're watching George Lucas's legacy. Companies that George Lucas created have entirely invented or developed to modern standards industry staple film technologies like modern motion control technology, 3D computer modeling, Go Motion, THX audio system, and even blue screen technology. So the making of these films is the driving force behind so much technological advancement in filmmaking that leads to the kind of movies you love. And they still look and sound by and large amazing to this day. Surely that makes them worth at least watching once. If you're prepared to sit through a Marvel movie, why wouldn't you be prepared to sit through a Star Wars film?
I think that's a very valid point, and I think your point about distillation, not derivation, is astute.
Science, bitch.
On it wasn't because he used a science word, Jason.
No one had laughed for about 5 minutes, so I thought.
Yeah, sorry.
I think there is a majesty to something that I really respect, and something that really resonates me about the Star Wars is the theme. I think the Star Wars theme has a majesty to it that really sets the tone and gives you that effect of the big blockbuster. Mm-hmm. But admittedly, that was the work of John Williams, not George Lucas. So that doesn't really help.
But as the creative force behind it, you know, he brought all those elements together, and I think it's perfectly valid to say that somebody who doesn't write everything or do every script, or, you know, can be an important.
I can agree with that, and I can agree with your point about because of Star Wars being point A, it has led to point B, C, D, and, you know, people spurring off of it. But the trouble is, I wasn't at point A. I probably came in at about point E or F. and at point E or F, the visuals, the quality, the ideas that have stemmed from it, take a superiority to it. So if I kind of look at those original techniques, it seems a bit dated and a bit.
Okay, I mean, if you say so, I don't think a lot of Star Wars looks dated at all. But I guess that's a relative thing, isn't it? That's opinion, isn't it? And may well be coloured by nostalgia, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that association and that nostalgia to that method of storytelling and that visual of that kind of era of film, I think the nostalgia is really woven in. Hence you get the die-hard fans who you would genuinely be concerned that they would die for this film. It means so much to their core that if you cut them, they bleed midichlorians. That's a thing, isn't it?
That's a thing. That is a thing.
I told them, I said, whatever you do, don't mention midichlorians because it's bullshit.
It is, yeah. That's definitely one of the most rubbish bits.
But I know that because of watching an episode of Parks and Recreation. That's where I learned that reference from.
Okay, so to that, when researching from secondary sources, that's my final argument for you, John. So you've talked about being aware peripherally of references, cultural and so forth. You've even earlier used the phrase, "I've done my research." So if you are into geek culture, as you say you are, and you know the references and elements of Star Wars are ubiquitous, surely just watching Star Wars is quote unquote easier than doing the research or having to piece together what people's references to something mean. So why not just watch the damn things?
But I think that the term research is probably misleading because that infers an active process, whereas what I've been subject to is a kind of passive absorbing. Because somebody turns on a valve and all of this pop culture nonsense is thrown at you, and you fling enough shit at the wall, some of it's bound to stick. And so that's the kind of place where I'm at. And because of that, I've had it just chucked at me so much. I just don't see the film offering me anything. There's going to be no surprise. There's going to be no journey for me.
Can I just ask? Is there a little bit of stubbornness? So just for example, everyone I've ever met in my life tells me to watch Breaking Bad, and I will never ever watch it because of that. And I admit that's a petty argument, but I'm never going to watch it because I am fed up with people telling me to watch it. So is there an element of that there?
There probably is. I'm an excellent person. I am a wonderful human being.
If you do say so yourself.
I'm very kind to the people around me. I'm very generous. I'm very handsome. So I've got all of these positive qualities. But
you're very modest. You're the most modest person on this podcast as well, I think.
Probably. Yeah. I don't like to blow my own trumpet.
I will confess, like goblins.
Yeah, and if you're 6'5", that's just physically difficult.
Absolutely. But yeah, there probably is that kind of pettiness there as well. But I just don't see it offering me anything. Mm-hmm. I think I'm just concerned that I'll be bored. Mm-hmm. To me, it seems like it would be a boring thing because of the point that I'm starting at. I'm starting at a point where lots of these ideas, references and things I already know. I know a rough outline of the narrative. So, because it's about 2 hours, isn't it? 2 and a bit?
Yeah, 2 hours long.
And it's just why would you proactively choose something that you think is going to make you bored?
Okay.
I've got things that make me bored, but at the end of it, there's an outcome. It's boring doing the hoovering, but the outcome of that is once it's done, my house is cleaner. If I just sit on my bed being bored for 2 hours, the outcome of that is my arse hurts because it's fallen asleep.
Just quickly, the counter to that would be quite simply that there's always an element when it comes to cultural things, consuming media that other people say that they like and that you might like and that you don't. So I guess the answer to that is to say there will be stuff in those films that people haven't already bored you to death with that you will probably enjoy because they're pretty good films, some of them. John, in regards to what you've been saying, let's put it this way. Can you think of a film that you really like for me and tell me what it is? Shawshank Redemption. Okay, right. So say you were trying to convince a friend to watch the Shawshank Redemption. Okay, now imagine that you described to your ambivalent friend everything that you can remember about that film and the order in which events happened, and they went, "Oh, but it's a bit sad, it'd be boring now." Do you think that you describing and telling somebody about the good aspects of that film is as good as watching that film for the first time?
No, but I think the action of then doing that has an impact. You know,
Sure.
It's the classic case of the thing being observed affecting the observer. You know, by putting that bias on there, of course you're going to affect the outcome. You know, and that's what I've had. I've had my outcome affected.
Right,
you know,
but you said, but your admission was no, it wouldn't be as good as watching that film for the first time. So by that logic,
I'm not a multiplex cinema. I'm just a guy at the size of a multiplex cinema. You know, I can wave my lightsaber for you, but I'm just a guy. You're right. I'm not a screen.
You're as big as a bloody cinema.
Yeah.
You're as tall, not as wide, I should point out.
But because I think the crux of it is your experience watching a film will never be as good as the first time you see it going in blind. That's it.
Absolutely.
If you want to experience a story, a narrative, if you want to experience a film, like as an experience in its own right, you have to go into that blind. Like any film where the trailer has put all the best jokes in it, it's going to be bollocks. Like, but the thing is, I've had I can't understate how much of these things because like it can't surprise me. It can't give me that spark. It can't give me that feeling.
Do you watch Shawshank multiple times? Do you watch it? Yeah. But it's a similar kind of thing.
Because of the nostalgia. Because I know
because you're linking it back to your first experience. Yeah, that is a perfectly valid position.
You know,
Is anyone going to mention, by the way, the wider Star Wars world?
There's no point.
You mean Jabba the Hutt? Because he's fat.
Well, yeah. I was kind of thinking, The Mandalorian, Clone Wars.
But that's the thing. It's its own worst enemy because of it. Because I can't really think of a global brand that's bigger. You know, it's like possibly Disney, and I appreciate that they're linked up now. But Disney is a lot broader. Like the biggest specific global brand, maybe Pokemon, maybe Super Mario, something like that. But because of the vastness of it, because of the vastness of the fandom, the vastness of the products that are out there, that's what makes it its own worst enemy in this context. Because I'm exposed to all of that. Like, it's so much of this story, you know, boy lives on a planet, not a star, you know, gets drafted in to play Star Wars, meets a guy with a furry guy called Chewie Backpack and whatnot.
Chewie Backpack, that's a grinder name and a half, isn't it?
They go fight a man in a funny mask who's, you know, one of these wizards, but he's not a good wizard. He's a bad wizard because he's on the dark side, even though they're in fucking space. It's all dark.
Except by the stars.
Yeah, but there aren't any stars. They go into warp drive, and the little pinpricks of light become lines.
Whoa. Hang on, no. Hyperdrive. Warp drive is Star Trek.
Yeah. Because that's the issue. Like, let's deconstruct it etymologically, shall we?
Always the issue.
Right.
I mean, I know for a fact they misuse the term parsec.
Yeah, do you know what?
Yes.
I wrote that down. That that's one thing I wasn't going to mention. Don't mention the bloody parsecs; it'll tear it apart. Yeah.
I feel like I covered that in one of my arguments. You know, one of the virtues of Star Wars is you actually can just park that stuff at the door.
Yeah. It's science fantasy. It's not even science fiction. It's science fantasy. Anyway,
and
it's not sci-fi.
I feel like we need to bring in the big guns because Tom and I have been sort of pointing our blasters your way. That Rich has thrown a couple of rocks.
He thought it was a thermal detonator. It was just a rock painted black.
But what we need to do is...
You'll see in those motion emotions as well, because I know the actions.
It's a podcast, Jonathan. No one can see you. So
in podcast, no one can see you.
In space.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, we're going to bring Daisy in, who Daisy owns his very own Death Star, and he's going to bring it to bear on you and basically destroy all your arguments. Daisy, go!
Well, can I just say thank you to Jason for bringing a guest onto this podcast that we are all thoroughly unprepared for. who has already shat on a great deal of my little puerile points I had in my list.
That's why I didn't want to go last.
And also apologise to Tom, whose section was very well thought out, very eloquent, well put together, and apologise that it's been sandwiched by the shower of shit that is Finney's little floppy disc of an argument and my puerile streak of piss as well. So, I think this has been a disastrous episode. I wouldn't be surprised if Finney never watches Star Wars ever again. My experiences of Star Wars will now be tempered with this vile. But here we go. I mean, you have quite literally shat. I've made a very puerile, humorous list of reasons why you should watch some of these Star Wars films, and you've shat on most of them already.
Go for them. Do them anyway.
My argument was going to be, I wouldn't recommend you watch all of the Star Wars franchise films, TV, blah blah blah. I would say just watch the original episodes 4, 5, and 6. Although you're not going to do that, so I might as well stop talking.
Start at the beginning. Start at episode 4. That's clever, isn't it? Oh, we're so edgy. We're doing new storytelling. We're starting at episode 4, and then we're going to move on to 5, and then 6, and then, if it has all gone wrong, we started at 4, so someone will give us some money to do 1, 2, 3, I'm sure.
To be fair, he was a visionary. He started up that way because he knew he didn't have the effects to make the first 3 at that time, so...
because why would you need more advanced effects in the latter films when technology's developed in the timeline? I know this has got nothing to do with anything, but I really want to get this complaint out there. I think a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, that's just petty. Oh, look, you got a special spot of the universe where your technology advanced more than the rest of it. No, come on, grow up. You're just trying to be clever.
Having a dig at us, right? Okay, right.
It's just I know the point you're trying to make, but come on, just grow up. You could. It's a space film. Just say. You don't even need to reference the time. You've just put that in to be obnoxious. A long time ago. What, in the history of
So it should have just said in space, really, shouldn't it?
Can I just say...
In space!
Can we just say, audibly, at the start of this particular episode, we are hearing a human being, I say slowly, quite quickly turning to the dark side, because he's getting angry.
There's a certain irony there.
Yeah. He's undertaking his own journey.
So basically, I'll go through some of the stuff I was going to say, and obviously I like doing the humorous, stupid side of the podcast because I'm not eloquent enough like Tom, but I do a little bit more research, unlike Finney.
How very dare you.
So I'll go through some of them. You haven't watched Indiana Jones, which has already shat on a couple of my points. So I was going to say Star Wars has got space Indiana Jones, so that's a good reason to watch it. But you haven't watched Indiana Jones, so it doesn't matter.
I haven't watched Indiana Jones. Okay.
No, it has got. I have. He hasn't. It's also got. You say you've mentioned space wizards, but that is quite a cool concept. They've got space Bigfoot, who you've already mentioned.
Chewie backpack.
Yep, Chewie backpack. If you get to Return of the Jedi, episode 6, you get angry Care Bears in it. That's fucking awesome. Again, you mentioned it. They've got laser swords. I know you don't like the whole concept of laser swords, but they are pretty cool. You've got one of the most iconic movie bad guys that's ever been on screen, also voiced by James Earl Jones. Mm. Amazing.
I mean, I like James Earl Jones. I think he's got a cracking voice. I like that the man in the costume is from the West Country, and he thought he was doing a voice.
I'm your father.
Fair play to George Lucas. That's a good prank. That is a really good prank. That is some of his finest work. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you just say the lines. We're rolling.
Force is strong with this one. And you mentioned John Williams. I think the episodes 4, 5, and 6 have got some of the best music soundtracks in all of movie.
Oh yeah, without doubt.
A great reason to watch at least A New Hope, if not Empire Strikes Back. Again, another great thing about Return of the Jedi is it's got a large bogey alien in it, and probably the first franchise to try and put a large bogey alien on the screen.
Are you talking Jabba the Hutt? Is that the bogey alien?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
I mean, I know it's petty, but that annoys me because I don't call myself John the Human. Someone else is going Anakin the Jedi, C-3PO the droid, R2-D2 the droid. Why do we have to state our species?
No, it's just part of that particular canonic. The Huttese race all have like Gardula the Hutt, Jabba the Hutt. They all just preface their names.
I mean, if they're all the same race, don't you know that they're Huttese? I mean, it's not like they don't have a distinct appearance or anything. Like you can tell, big space bogey. Yeah, you're probably Huttese, Or are they trying to do like being colourblind across space? It's just like, I don't want to assume. I don't want to assume that he's Huttese. Oh, Jabba the Hutt. Oh, I see.
They're just being accurate and all inclusive, so it's fine.
Oh dear.
I imagine as well, he didn't want to just go by Jabba because Jabba sounds like a fat person, and like if somebody was telling someone about Jabba, they'd be going, "Is he?"
It sounds like a really esoteric form of dub reggae, doesn't it? That's where you're going to go wrong there.
Oh dear. And maybe he didn't want the pretense of a Prince or a Madonna where, he's just known by one name. So he's like, we don't have surnames in this culture. We're all just fat slugs.
Daisy, carry on before I stop liking Star Wars.
I think I'd have at least shortened the middle name to just T, if that was me. Jabba T Hutt, I would be.
Yeah, like the Irish did with O and of.
Yeah.
Jabba the Hutt.
Big error. Just come to me, Steve.
Daisy, can you talk Huttese in an Irish accent?
No, because I'll offend any listener we may have who may or may not be Irish, so I'm not going to do that. Well, yeah, if there's a The Hutt listening to this as well, then why have you called yourselves The Hutt? Just call yourself your first fucking name, Jesus.
I'm not convinced that we've done very well here, guys.
I would say we've probably done worse at this than anything.
I think we've done irreparable damage to the Star Wars brand, if I'm honest.
No, I'm going to put my foot down and say that it's been fun to have your guest on, and he's only strengthened my love for the franchise, mainly out of pure stubbornness, with all his logical and concise counterpoints to all of our ill-prepared and ill-thought-out shit ones that we came up with. But my love for Star Wars is greater than ever.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I would say that I am a relatively unique case, just because of the way that I have come across Star Wars has been in a format that has not done the franchise justice. Mm-hmm. And it has given me a negative bias towards it because of the mediums in which I've received it.
So
if, as a young boy, I had watched the films, chances are I would, become a member of the cult, sign up, get my own bread knife and all that sort of thing. But I think just the route that I've had coming into it, and the way I've come across it as an adult as well, the fact that I am heavily into geek culture, and because I've, just kind of had this naff version of it, I've not had it presented to me in the correct format. I mean, if I was to watch it now,
John,
obviously it's not.
What you just said is the best argument for watching the films. You've not had it presented to you in the correct way. You've only had it presented to you in this NAF format. That is the compelling argument to
and now we invited him here and presented it to him in the naffest format imaginable.
Yeah, and
And
then
what
he's
we-
just made the
what-
argument for us.
What we
Yeah.
can do as well.
But
What we can do
seriously
as
for a
well.
moment.
What we can do as well is we can have him on at a later one once he's watched it, and he can then talk us through his experience. So he
Yeah,
has to watch
yeah.
it now.
Oh,
So
that'd be
everything he says from here on is pointless because he's going to watch it, so he can come back on the show.
Once he's got his brain slug firmly implanted and he'll
Yeah.
be compliant,
Yeah.
then he can come back on the
Compliance.
podcast anytime.
In all fairness, the argument of watching it to then come back on the podcast is probably the most compelling one.
We should have led with that.
Yes!
Bloody hell!
The argument that I've not had it presented to me in the right format, I completely agree with, but I don't think that that's reason to watch it. I think
I think
like-
it is.
Watch
No,
it
no,
and
bec-
so we're threatening
because
him with
I've,
the
I've, had
shittest threat
it,
in the
I've
world.
had it ruined. I've had it ruined for me. Like I know what's going to happen. I know
Then
the noises
unruin
I'm
it.
going to hear. I know the tedious discussion. I know that the hero's going to snog his sister at one point and be like,
Yes.
we didn't know.
Whoa, whoa,
What?
whoa, whoa,
That
whoa,
makes
whoa.
incest okay, does it?
There's no
ignorant.
tongues.
Okay,
There's no tongues.
folks, guys, stand back. I've got this.
Go on.
Badge. At this point, can you categorically say that you wouldn't enjoy, either in whole or in part, watching a Star Wars film?
Yeah. I don't see
You can
a way.
categorically say you wouldn't enjoy any part of watching a film, having not done so.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Or is there going to be like? I mean, if there's a funny gag that I've not heard before, but it
Okay.
doesn't look like a laugh
Answer
a minute
the question,
kind of deal.
John. Answer the question. Can you categorically say that you would hate every part of that experience?
So what you're saying is I should commit 2 and a bit hours to something on the chance that I would get maybe a few moments of enjoyment because
I'm
you know I may as well go have a wank if that's
To
the
be-
case. It's just more
I'm
efficient.
saying, and let's not get into whataboutery because you can have a wank and watch Star Wars. We know we've all done it, and we can and will talk about it a lot on this podcast. So the point of what I'm saying, which you probably know I'm getting at, is if you can consider it like an experiment, and
Yes.
you don't know the results of an experiment until it's conducted.
And
That's-
can I just say you've already committed an hour and a bit to the shit of this podcast.
You could have
So
just
you
watched
may
a
as
fucking
well
Star
double
Wars
it
film
up and
instead
watch
of
a
this.
Star Wars film.
Yeah, but no, the hour and a bit to this is fine because I love feeling smug. You know, oh bloody hell! I've had a right smug time. It's been brilliant. If I do this in my own home under lockdown and just be smug for an hour and a half, oh, the air gets frosty.
To be fair, you just,
It's not going to be appreciated.
Can
Do you
you not
actually
just
live with
watch the
anyone?
film
I mean-
and then feel smug that you think it's shit? Because wouldn't that be joyful if you got 2 hours of smugness? I told them this would be shit, and I can't
then-
wait to tell them about it.
when we do that, we can invite him back onto the podcast, but have him in a separate Zoom meeting by himself, so he thinks he's talking to us.
We can just use minifigs. We can just
Yes.
talk to this
Ultimately-
guy, this stormtrooper.
It's basically it's taken us to threaten him with the dubious honour of coming back onto the podcast to get him to possibly watch the film rather than cogent, well thought out arguments. So
I think we
Also-
should wrap it all up.
I'll tell you where I'm at. I think as a social experiment, getting me to watch it to then come back on the podcast to discuss it I think is a sensible idea. I don't know.
Go on.
Yeah, I don't know the outcome that's going to be, but you know that I think that's the most compelling point. I think I'm open to the idea that if this is a lifestyle that you guys want to pursue, you know, I'm fine with that. There are certain things that I have a level of love and geekery for that is not healthy, you know, but people leave me to it. You know, they let me live my life the way I want to. And if you want to be fully committed, you know, members of the Star Wars cult, then that's fine. You know, we could still get on. You know, we could break bread over a table and that kind of thing. But you know, it's just not for me. You know, it's legal,
table.
but it's not compulsory.
I feel like we've bullied him now.
Yes, it's
No,
He
fine.
doesn't sound very bullied.
No, true.
No, and I am feeling quite pleased with myself because that's 4 against 1, and I'm still standing.
Yeah, well done. You've done very well. Now it is time to ask the very final question. Just clear it up for us once and for all, and we have to go with this answer. John, will you, based on the arguments that we have come up with today, watch a Star Wars?
Not based on the arguments you've come up with today, but based on the fact that I think it might be interesting to watch it and then have my opinion scrutinised on a podcast.
So you're going to watch a Star Wars? You're going to watch a
That's
Star
great.
Wars?
That's great.
I'm certainly going to give it some consideration, and I'll keep you abreast of what's going on.
It has to be one of the original ones, not one of the new ones.
Yeah, Empire Strikes Back.
I will go for A New Hope.
Okay, that's cool.
That's cool.
Which
the right
is,
place to
you know,
start.
ironically what you guys are feeling at the moment.
We are.
I think it's what
generally.
we've given you, John. I think it's what we brought into your life.
We have brought
Should I watch it by myself or should I watch it with the wife?
the wife.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Tabs will love it. Has Tabs watched it before?
I think so. Yeah, Tabs is a big film buff. She doesn't
Tabs-
like the fact I've not seen Lord of the Rings. She's got the
Tabs can
special
sit there
editions.
smugly while you watch it. So yeah, that'll be great. And then we'll just have you on periodically to abuse you about not watching like Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings. And we
I
can
mean,
just-
if you want this to be a theme, that's fine. My wife is desperate for me to see these films. It's just I've got shit to do, you know.
Like argue with us about it for an hour and a half.
Yeah, absolutely.
glorious. Right. So I feel like
Lego to database.
I feel like we've kind of succeeded to a certain extent, or at least I think John at least managed to persuade himself while we floundered like a bunch of idiots. And
I think at best it's a Pyrrhic victory. Rich has already died. Daisy's still in shock. It's not nothing.
I need to drink some alcohol and watch
I'm
Star
very
Wars.
proud that, as Jason has said, that I've not only managed to argue with 4 people. I thought, tell you what, I'll take their side for a bit and argue against myself as well. That'll make it a more even match.
Don't get cocky, kid.
Yeah. No, you've done very well, John. And
Nice one. Well done, everyone.
unfortunately, we haven't. Thank you for coming on. It's been
Thank you. It's been-
absolutely
it's been
joyful
Thank
having
you
us.
very much.
I've had a lot of fun. Out of all the podcasts I've done, this one's been the most recent. So, yeah top stuff.
Boom.
Wonderful stuff. Okay, thank you everyone for listening, and we will give you an update in a few weeks on how John has got on watching Star Wars. Thank you.